Hey, friends, and welcome to another episode of You Deserve to Love Your Job. If you're watching this live, definitely share your questions as thoughts, as I really want to know what's on your mind. I want to know what questions you have so we can answer them live during the session. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening on your podcast, definitely follow and subscribe, and I'm glad you've joined. Today's episode, I really want to talk about getting unstuck. And when I think about being stuck, I'm thinking about when you want to do something, you have an idea about something, you want to do it, but you're actually not doing it, right? So that could be something about a career change. It could be a new business you want to start, a role change. It could even be an interaction you're trying to change. Maybe you have a kind of negative interaction cycle with someone at work or in your life, and you want to pivot that to something different. So it's something you're thinking about, but you're not actually doing, and so that feeling of being stuck. So, what we want to talk about today are what are some strategies you can use to get unstuck, to begin taking action towards your career goals, your dreams, your purpose, all those things that matter most to you that you've been thinking about, but maybe haven't been taking action on. So, I have a number of strategies, but we're going to probably stick to about five top strategies for getting unstuck. So I'm curious about how many people feel that way right now. How many of us have something you want to do, but you haven't yet taken action on it? And if that is you, and especially if you're live, I'd love to know, what do you think is holding you back? So, what do you think might be getting in the way? What do you think might be keeping you stuck? Because I'll use some of that to pivot and talk about things that are most interest to you. But let's jump in. So, we're going to talk about five things, and some of these are simple things. Some of these may be things you haven't thought about before. But I think one principle to think about, one of my favorite mentors, Cheryl, used to have this saying that common sense doesn't equal common practice, meaning that even though there are some things we know we should be doing, that's a far way from actually doing them. So what we want to talk about is, what is our common practice? So as we kind of think about these strategies and try to apply them to our life, it's not as much do we know them, because some of them we may know. The question is, are we doing them? Have we done them? Are we applying them to this area where we might feel stuck?
Now available. You deserve to love your job. How to find your purpose and enjoy your life. You may not have learned this growing up, but you deserve to love your job. You will spend more time at work than in any other activity in your life, and you deserve to love it. Research tells us that people who love their work are twice as likely to enjoy their life. This book will help you create a blueprint to help you fulfill your purpose, love your job, and live the life you were designed to live. Now available at Amazon.
So let's jump in. The first one is, if you want to get unstuck, so start doing something you've been thinking about, the first one is write it down. So get it out of your head. There is something about the writing process. And I mean, when I say writing, I mean, you could really be physically writing, you could be typing, whatever works for you. But there's something about getting it out of your head onto paper that makes it real. It starts to feel like reality. It starts to feel like a plan. It starts to feel like something you might actually do. It also gives you a chance to reflect on it. So when you write something down, you have the chance to step away from it and come back to it, to improve it, to take away from it, to make it better. But writing it down is the beginning of that process. And I think about this even when I started my business. So I started my business in 2016. And I had the first idea for starting the business probably about 7 to 9 months before that. But even actually prior to that, I'd been thinking about the idea of starting a business probably for 7 years, honestly, but I hadn't written it down. So 7 to 9 months before I started the business, I decided, you know what? I'm going to write down every thought I have about what this business could possibly be. And I just pulled up a business plan format that was in Word. So a Word template business plan format. And I typed out everything I knew inside of me about what I wanted this business to be. And there were, of course, a lot of sections that were blank. But as soon as I finished typing that document, and I think it took me definitely less than 2 hours, it's like something I did on a Saturday morning. And as soon as I finished typing that document, it was like, I knew it was real. I was like, no, this is a real idea. This is a real plan. This isn't just something you've been kind of looping in your mind for the last several years. And so, whether it's 7 to 9 months from the day I wrote that plan is when I actually launched and started the business. So, there is this power in writing something down and making it real. And then you also have a chance to get other people's feedback on it because it's coherent enough, it's clear enough that you can get other people to make it better. So, first strategy is write it down. And if you haven't done that, begin that. Even if it's one sentence today, if it's one idea, you can add on to it. It could be a note in your phone that you're starting with, right? So, wherever it is, write it down and you can add on it and make it better over time. So, that's the first strategy. The second strategy to getting unstuck. So, again, doing something that you've been thinking about but haven't yet taken action on. The second strategy is if your thing that you want to do is going to take time, then you have to adapt your life and calendar. So, I say that because, it's hard to find time. Like we say, I'll find time to do it. That's almost impossible. And if you've been stuck with something for a long time and it's going to require extra time to do it, finding time may never work. So I thought about last year, really early last year, I thought about starting this podcast and I'd written down some ideas from it. I'd taken step one. I'd had some plans. I even put some dates in place and it never happened. Nothing ever got off the ground. It never happened. And it was because I really didn't have the time in my calendar and life to do it. I've learned that, building a podcast, doing a podcast takes time. You got to do the research. You have to have people to help you. So it takes time. And what I did toward the end of this year in December was I totally reset my calendar for 2022. So I figured out when I was going to have coaching meetings, when I was going to do the internal business things. And in that calendar, I specifically made time for podcast. Not that I had a podcast yet, not that I had any content for the podcast yet, for sure, but I made time in my calendar for whatever was going to be in this podcast. And when that time came, I spent it on that activity. So a lot of times things we want to do, if you want to start a side business, and if it's something new that's going to take a new investment of time, you have to kind of adapt your calendar and life going forward to make time for it. And once you have that time, then now you have time carved out to spend in it and to actually do the things you've been planning to do. So another strategy for getting unstuck is to adapt your life and calendar going forward to make specific time for whatever that thing might be. So that's the second strategy. The third strategy that I want you to think about is what has worked for you in the past. So, what's a time before that you were stuck in a certain area and you were trying to get unstuck? And what worked for you before? There's a concept in positive psychology that says that, instead of focusing all the things that went wrong and all the obstacles that we may have had in a situation before, think about what went right. So, when before were you really stuck on something? You wanted to do something, you weren't taking action, but you did. Then you did take action, you did get it done. What about that worked? And really explore that and figure out what strategies in that work for you that you could probably bring forward to work for you in this new space as well. If it's a space of a career goal or a side business, or, as I mentioned, just wanting to change how your interactions are with someone. And for me, what helps me are other people. So when I'm stuck on something, I get energy, inspiration, I get ideas and plans when I get to partner with other people. And that could be talking with other people. That could be hiring people to help me to work on something. That could be coaches. I'm a coach, but I also have coaches that help me in different areas. So I get a lot of energy from other people. Like I have a coach that helps me with nutrition and working out because that's not something I feel like I've always been strong in. And I wanted to make a change. I felt really stuck there and I wanted to get unstuck. So I know other people help me. So I hired someone to help me with that. I was even thinking about, it was years ago and we were planning a meeting. It was a big kind of functional meeting for the HR team. And it was me and two other friends of mine that were assigned to plan this meeting. And we were in his office and nothing was working. And so we kind of changed offices, added some more people to the conversation, and our ideas started to spark. So this idea of knowing what's worked for you in the past, for some people, what works for them are things like time alone. Maybe you just need time to think and that gets you going and gets you unstuck. If that's the case, maybe you need to take a couple days off from work, or carve out time for yourself to spend in the park or wherever else, just so you can spend time alone and gather your own thoughts. Some people writing it down works. Some people need more knowledge, like they're inspired to act when they have more knowledge about something. So maybe you want to invest in a conference on a particular topic, or invest in some books or other things that help you build your knowledge. So one thing you want to think about is, a lot of times getting unstuck are strategies that are unique to us. So in doing that, you want to think about what's worked for me in the past, and what from that can I pull forward to work for me going forward. So for me, it's other people, and for you, it might be something different. So that's strategy number 3. Again, getting unstuck, starting to move in areas where we, are not moving yet, but we really want to. So the 4th strategy, and this came from a conference that I attended, is to acknowledge that you won't know the end from the beginning. So just acknowledge it, get comfortable with it, and don't even expect to know the end from the beginning. So one of my most favorite things that I've done is presenting at MegaFest a couple of times. So that's a conference held by TD Jakes and the Potter's House Ministries, and it's conferences on all types of topics, health and wellness, leadership, all under kind of a Christian focus. But anyway, one year at one of the conferences, we were talking about career goals and career dreams. And I asked the attendees, I said, okay, how many people know one thing that they could be doing in service to their greatest career goal or their greatest career dream? And I remember being so surprised that maybe 70 to 80% said, yeah, they knew they knew one thing they should be doing or could be doing, but yet they hadn't done it. So that's the classic being stuck, right? They kind of had an idea of what they should be doing, but they hadn't actually taken action on it. And so then the follow-up question was, well, tell me why. Why haven't you taken action? What do you think is stopping you? And for a great majority of the people, it was because they weren't sure it was going to work out. Like, I'm not sure where this is going. I can see 1 or 2 steps, but I can't see the next. I don't know how I'm going to figure out step 4 because I don't have the money for that, or whatever it might be. They were really focused on the end from the beginning, which we all know we say we should do that. But knowing the end from the beginning, at least for me and for a lot of other business owners I've talked to and just leaders, is almost impossible, right? So if you wait for certainty to know what's going to work out, to take that first step or the next step, you probably never take it, because it's a bit of a do loop. You're looking for something that you may never find. So in looking for certainty, it can feel like you're doing something. I like this topic I used to call Procrasti Planning. It's like you're planning, you're thinking, it feels like you're taking action, but in reality, you're not. You're just procrastinating by planning. But you're kind of hoping to find that certainty in something, when in reality, you may never find that. The business I have today is similar to what I thought it would be when I started the business, but it's not the same. And I never could have thought of all the steps it was going to take to create a business from the beginning. I didn't have a lot of business owners in my family. I didn't have a template for it. So I had the idea of starting it, but not a lot beyond that. So one way to get yourself unstuck is to let go of the need for certainty. And as long as you know your next step, that's all you need. So you're just going to take action on the next step. And every time you take action, it's going to reveal more of what's to come, right? It's going to reveal more of what that next step is. So as long as you know that, you really have enough to take action. And, not looking for the certainty is what might help you get unstuck, because you may never have it. So that's the 4th strategy. And then the 5th strategy I wanted to focus on to help you get unstuck is one I learned from Michelle Poler at a conference. So Michelle Poler is an author, and she did this really interesting thing. You can look it up on YouTube and lots of places, but she did 100 days of doing something that she was afraid of. So every day for 100 days, she did something she was afraid of. It was everything from, being in really high places, to doing public speaking, to, I think I remember lots of creepy things. Like, I don't know if it was snakes or spiders or what, but 100 days of doing things that she was really afraid of, in a plan to face her fears. And so she talks about that process and what she learned from it. And one of the things she said that I took a lot from is a lot of times we do worst case planning, which I've done a lot of, which is to say, okay, if I start this business and it fails, here are the things that I would do then. I would go back and get a job, or I would, whatever it is that I thought I would need to do. And that's not bad to do that. I think that can be prudent to do that. But she says you should also ask yourself another question if you're stuck, which is instead of what's the worst thing that can happen, what is the best thing that can happen? So, not what's the worst thing that can happen, but if I were to do this, what's the absolute best thing that could happen from me taking this step? And because sometimes the negativity by thinking what's the worst thing can actually increase your fear, can increase your hesitancy and make it less likely for you to take that step. So instead of always focusing on the worst case scenario, always focusing on the worst case scenario and what could go wrong, think about what could go right. Like, what's the best thing that could happen? And when I think about this business, there's so many best things that have happened that I never would have even imagined. One of my favorite things is in my own business, I can hire people that I love and care about to work with. And so you get to surround yourself by people you just adore. That's a best thing that could happen. So there are a lot of best things that can happen if we give ourselves permission to really think about them and dream about them. And in doing so, that can really change your energy. So it can change your energy towards, oh my goodness, what could go wrong, which might keep you stuck to, man, what could go right? What could be amazing about this? Because that might give you the inspiration, the um, excitement, and even the reason for doing something and becoming unstuck. Because once your why is big enough, and if your why is tied to what's the best thing that could happen with this, then you might be willing to do it, right? So instead of asking what's the worst thing that can happen, ask what's the best thing and see what happens from there. So those are my 5 top tips for getting unstuck. Um, if you have others, I would love to hear about them. You can always message me on Instagram, and I would love to hear from you and definitely respond and hear what you're thinking as well. And so just thank you all for joining, and I'll see you next time. Be well.